Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Monday, March 16th, 2026 episode of The Marco Dre Show. Thank you for tuning in here. Today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. You know, folks, rather than bore you about who won the Oscars yesterday, which I keep seeing this through news outlets today. That's like the number one headline. Who won the Oscars? Who the hell cares? It's 100% completely useless to our society as a whole right now. Does anyone really care who won an award in Hollywood yesterday? Or at any point for that matter? No, of course not. I want to get right into our news flow this week. Let's start the week off the right way. And I have a great article for you from the Wall Street Journal I saw over the weekend. It does a great job about how the Iran war is disrupting the global supply chains, which should be important to everybody. This should be a cause of concern to you. This is what you should be focusing on. And if you've been listening to my show for any length of time, you know I said that this was going to be something that would be coming if we got into this war. So it begins by talking about how the war in the Middle East has now roiled the oil prices and the gas markets now for much of the past 2 weeks. We're now in week 3 of this war now, with no end in sight. Now the conflict is now starting to ripple beyond the energy industry, causing havoc in a complex global supply chain issues that underpin the world trade. So this in and of itself is mind-boggling, and why no one else is talking about this. This should be number one right now. Now our economies are affected by this. And not just our economy, but the world economy now. We're seeing now ports around the Indian Ocean that are filling up with redirected cargoes that can't get into the Persian Gulf. Rates to ship goods from Asia to anywhere near the Middle East now have skyrocketed. We have shipping hubs in Asia now that are running low on fuel because they can't get the necessary oil out of the Persian Gulf. By the way, more than 100 ships now are stuck inside the Persian Gulf. What are they doing there? They're just sitting there. How are any of these people on these ships getting supplies, food, water, you name it? Now, much of the shipping industry's pain, like for that of the oil, can be traced back to the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran said they would do should we start this conflict. And they've held to their word. Say what you want about the Iranians, they're at least holding to their word. But the small but globally significant waterway between Iran and Oman is only open for a select few group of people. Isn't that interesting? And it's, of course, only friends of the Iranians. They're allowing oil to still get through to China right now, by the way. I guess the United States is allowing this. This is what President Trump has said. And by the way, some 11.7 million barrels have now made their way back to China. So China's not really feeling this like some of these other Asian countries, by the way. But this goes deeper than just the oil, folks. It goes deeper than just the liquid natural gas. In this article, they illustrate the shipping of a company out of Italy. Emanuele Grimaldi, his managerial and company called the Grimaldi Group. His family goes back many generations, back to the 1300s, if you can believe that. And they specialize in shipping of, I believe it's cars, European cars, bound for the Persian Gulf. Now, obviously, they can't get in. So now this disrupts their business, and of course, their monetary funds. And as a result, the expensive cargo won't arrive anytime soon to the Persian Gulf. And unfortunately, most of the nearby ports, of which they can possibly dispatch all of these vehicles, now are extremely full now because they're getting overrun, there's bottlenecking going on, and it's a big issue now for this company, for this Italian company. We're seeing other major container shippers, right? Same thing. They're getting stuck on these key routes. They don't know where to go. They're stopped. They're just sitting there. Folks, this disruption is really starting to add the cost. And of course, these delays for these businesses all around the world are going to really start to get out of control very, very soon. So the turmoil is really a blow not just to shipping, but to retail and what have you as well. We need to understand this, and we're causing this. So I can't imagine any of these countries in Europe and Asia are very happy about any of this. When you cannot get goods to market, when the shelves are bare, and especially in some of these Gulf Arab states that rely 90%, 80, 90% on cargo being shipped in for food, that's a big problem. What are these people going to do in a couple days now? I remember earlier last week I was reading to everybody that the UAE had like 7, 8 days of stable food for their regular supply. What are they going to do after that? Go into their reserves? What are they going to do? How are they going to get it in there? Are they going to try to fly it in there? When you have missiles flying overhead? One could only know. But these trade routes, they're very important, obviously, to get goods and services and what have you. Obviously, a lot of operations work. This is where people are making their money. Ports that bring in goods to their country, raw materials. And that right now has been put on hold for quite some time. So far, the Pacific Ocean routes, by the way, serve much of the U.S. market and remain largely unaffected, so we're really not feeling this right now. We're just not. But shipping companies are watching the situation really nervously. And, one of the ways in which trouble could spread to the Pacific is, of course, through the availability and, of course, the cost of fuel now, because now that's going to get affected. What's going to happen to Japan and China and the other, South Korea, for example? What are they going to do when they don't get their oil supply? How are they going to get goods to us? Where are they going to get it from? And again, this is what I keep telling people. The supply will eventually catch up to everybody. We're feeling it just a little bit here in the United States. I saw over the weekend in, I believe it was the Bay Area, out of the California Post. Now it costs $150 to fill up your gas tank in the Bay Area, folks. Now, can you imagine what's taking place in some of these other countries that aren't getting this oil supply at all, and they're drying up? They're digging into their reserves, whatever reserves they have. By the way, we're going to get involved in that very, very soon as well. But the rhetoric will no longer matter when the supply is wiped out. So, again, it's going to be felt all around the world. Even if the oil refining began right today, let's say the war stopped today, for example. It's not, but let's say it did. It would now still take weeks to get things caught up, running, back up and moving, and then get the oil onto tankers and, of course, travel however long it takes to get to whatever the said destination is. So it's not like just flipping a switch. Oh, we're back in running. Here we go. This is going to take lots of time. By the way, you're also very well behind. You have no oil. And the further refining that takes place once it gets to these countries, too, that takes a while as well before it even gets out in shipments to their country. So this will not be an overnight fix, folks, and this is why I told you things are going to get much, much worse. And by the way, you can thank both Mr. Netanyahu, President Trump, for this mess that we're in. This war of aggression. I can't tell it to you any other way. That's what this is. Of which no matter how much we bomb, no matter how much we think we've destroyed 7,000 targets. I was just listening to President Trump right now. He said we hit 7,000 targets. I say, okay, fine. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt our military strength. Not at all. But what does that do for us? What does hitting 7,000 targets do? Does it deter Iran to succumb to what we want to do and our wishes? Of course it doesn't. Again, I don't see us winning this conflict because it's not doing anything. Bombing things means, we think, okay, we're bombing things. Everything's going to be fine now that we've bombed 7,000 targets. But it's not deterring them. They can still replace their launchers. They still have massive stockpiles. We're running out of missiles, by the way. I know I think it's our Patriot missiles that are very low in supply right now, these defense missiles that we have. By the way, what happens to Israel when all this dries up? What are they going to do to defend themselves, if at all? I was also listening to President Trump right now. He's in a meeting, I believe, still, in this press conference. He's speaking right now. But one of the things he was saying, too, was that 90% of the overall missiles, of which they have been firing, have been reduced now. So there's a 90% reduction rate. And everybody's very happy about this. But then I say to myself, well, wait a minute. They're shooting less because they don't have to defend as much. What do I mean by that? For example, when the war first started, they were lobbing lots of missiles, right? And again, these are older stockpiles. These are missiles that are several years old. We haven't even gotten to their new technology yet. But in order to penetrate Iron Dome, they have to send out more missiles, right? The Iron Dome comes up, those defensive missiles, they shoot up, they intercept, right? That's how it's supposed to work. And, sometimes one or two would get through. But now they don't have to worry about that anymore because their defensive missile stockpile is completely depleted. So they can only, if they want to hit 10 targets, well, they're just going to send 10 missiles out. And they know they'll land. They've also got these new cluster munitions now they're using. If anyone's taken to social media, they can see that in the Israeli night sky. I mean, it just looks like a huge cascade of missiles are flying down and they're hitting their targets unscathed. There's nothing even shooting up at them anymore, primarily. So, again, what does Israel do next? What's the next step here? When they can no longer defend themselves. And they start throwing out hypersonic missiles. Or we can't get any of our missiles to any of these bases throughout the Middle East anymore. How are we going to do that? What happens when these stockpiles go away? We have no idea. The longer the strait stays closed, the more of the replenishing of oil inventories in Asia becomes a major challenge here, folks. So it's not just the war itself is a big problem. We have to talk about these economies as well. Let's not forget, Japan gets 95% of its oil from the Middle East. South Korea gets 70%. India, 55%. China gets roughly around 12% of their oil from the Middle East, their daily usage, if you will. This is going to crash a lot of these economies of Europe, of Asia, particularly largely the Gulf Arab states that rely on the oil, the liquefied natural gas sales for their economies. These are big makers for the economy. What are they going to do? Oh, by the way, this is going to affect ours as well, too. If we can't get goods from Japan, from China, from all these places, what are we going to do? What happens to our economy? Because we're not manufacturing like we once were. It's going to bring everything down. And again, on top of it, you're going to enter a deep recession, possibly a depression. That's what I've been hearing about. And that's the sad truth about this war. This is what we're pushing ourselves into. And on top of it, destroying their economies, that's what's happening right now, for this ridiculous idea to go to war for Israel. This is what we're doing this for. I think Marco Rubio said it very clearly. And he said, hey, Israel was going to go in. We said, we'll follow you right through it. That was the reason for the war. Again, I can't say it to you any other way because they're the ones telling us this. They saw an opportunity and they went with it. Okay, fine. But look now what we're in. The decapitation strike did not work. They've replaced the people in the military. They've replaced the supreme leader. They knew this was coming. They saw the buildup of the ships, of the fleets. And here we are, folks. Oh, so let's keep going in this article. It says the world's second largest container shipping company has 10 ships trapped inside the Persian Gulf. It said it would need at least 10 more days to resume normal operations, even if the event of a ceasefire were to occur. Thursday, a ship operated by, I believe it's Maersk, was hit by fragments of a projectile causing a fire on the ship. So, again, no one is unscathed here, by the way. No one is unscathed. By the way, neither are these Gulf Arab states that have had to deal with, for example, desalination plants being hit, for example. Not a good thing because these countries rely about 80% of their daily drinking water comes from these desalination plants. Now, we hit Iran's, but the problem is Iran only uses about 8 or so % of their daily drinking water comes from desalination. So we've got to look at the context here. Obviously, it's going to have a bigger effect on these Gulf Arab states. What are they going to do when they have no drinking water? What's going to happen to these people? It's a hot climate, by the way, especially this time of year. What are they going to do? Die of thirst? That's going to look really good. Yeah, folks, we're in lots of trouble here. We're in lots of trouble. I told you before, a handful of ships have made it through the strait right now, including some under the Chinese and Turkish flags. That's what's being said right now. But brokers say that the limited transits for now represent a testing of the waters rather than a return to the sailing. Again, the Iranians have said they're going to keep it closed for the United States, their allies, and Israel. No one of that under those flags are going to be able to get through. And I do believe they're going to hold themselves to it. Again, we could talk about the bombing on Karg Island right now that took place over the weekend. But again, what did that do? What did that do? By the way, they're still using Karg Island to ship out oil, the Iranians. So there's so much that's taking place here, and it's not deterring the Iranians. It's business as usual for them. Everyone else seems to be suffering. In Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they're all struggling right now. They're all struggling greatly right now. When Iran said that they would close the Strait of Hormuz, some shipping companies declared that it was simply an end of voyage for their cargoes. They're not going to try to get through this, despite what the United States has said. We have the force majeure, right? The superior force of events that really we don't know what's going to take place now. They have no control over the situation now, any of these ships right now. So they're staying put. They're not going to try to get through. This has never been seen before at this scale, folks. I want everyone to understand this. We've never seen anything like this before. This is the first time that an entire shipping region has been totally closed off to the rest of the world. And by the way, where is the UN right now in all this? Isn't it their job to prevent wars and, of course, hold nations accountable that are committing war crimes? Where are they right now? Nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found, folks. And by the way, this is also costing a lot of these companies a lot of money as well. I just want everyone to be clear on this. Companies now need to fork out $2,107 on average to ship a 40-foot container from China to India's commercial capital. Up to 56% of the first U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran, according to the data by the providers here. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that this is taking place. And again, there's no end in sight for any of this, folks. That's the biggest problem about all this. There's no end in sight here. Now, Bloomberg also has an article out, just came out over the weekend, says that President Trump has now stepped up calling to reopen the vital Strait of Hormuz, saying that warships will hopefully be sent to the area near Iran's coast to help commercial vessels sail through safely. Well, we know that's not taking place because they've all said, screw you, we're not doing this. Japan came out and said, we're not sending warships. What are you, crazy? China says, no way, we don't even need it. We're getting oil still. It's not as much, but we're still getting some. The UK, France said they're not going to use their navy to go through and do this. And as a result, that President Trump has come out and saying now that NATO will suffer greatly because of this. Wonderful. Just what we need. Now, his comments on Truth Social, which didn't really provide a timeline, came hours after he ordered a strike on Karg Island, which did take place, of course, as we know, from which Iran exports almost all of its oil, upping the ante in the Middle East war that has now raged for more than 2 weeks with little signs of easing right now. By the way, Karg Island holds, I believe it's roughly 18 million barrels. I think it could hold up to about 30, but right now it's got about 18 million barrels. And it handles about 85 to 95% of the country's crude oil exports. Here's the problem, though. We didn't hit that. When we struck the island, we did not hit the oil refinery. We hit their military facilities on the island. Again, it's a very small island. I think they have a 7,000 airstrip on the island that we put a hole in the middle of it. There's other neighborhoods in this island. It's very small. I think there's about 30 different neighborhoods that are on this very small island, too. They're not very big, though. But they have this massive oil docking terminal, if you will. And this is where ships would come in, they hook up, they put the oil on, then they sail on their way to wherever the destination is. Well, they're still doing this right now, today, as I speak to you. So nothing has changed, but now we're talking about putting 2,000 to 2,500 Marines on this island. And I have to ask myself the question. Trump was coming out now and just saying everything there in their military force has been obliterated. Adding that he chose not to hit the oil infrastructure for reasons of decency. Now, he threatened to do so should Iran do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. So, again, we've got to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this bombing on Karg Island? Everything seems to be obliterated, so why are we sending troops to this island? And the other question you have to ask yourself is, what are they going to do on this island? Are they going to prevent the oil transportation? I doubt it. How are they going to be stocked with food? How are they going to get replenished with supplies? How are we going to do this? How are we even going to get them in there? Because you have to cross through the strait in order to get to this location. Then you risk the possible attack of drones hitting them. What are you going to just put 2,500 Marines on an island and keep them there? And pray for the best? What is this going to be like Saving Private Ryan? Put them behind enemy lines and just pray to God that everything goes well? I mean, we say these things, and by the way, this ship is coming from, I believe is coming from Asia right now to bring these Marines there. I don't understand this position at all, though. I don't see how this benefits us in any way. I don't see how this changes the trajectory of anything in this war. To put an actual land invasion, which I don't know if that's what the idea is with this. I can't imagine it would be. You really need to outweigh the enemy by roughly 3 to 4, right? That's a ratio. 3 or 4 ratio to 1. That's what it needs to be. We don't have that. We simply don't have, even if we called in all of our reservists right now. So again, I'm very confused about why he's doing this and now calling for boots on the ground on Karg Island. It doesn't make much of any sense to me. But again, they're still operating. They're still pushing out their oil. Their allies are still getting their oil from the Persian Gulf. But it's the allies of the United States that are struggling as a result of this. Now, Trump still says he's hoping now for China, which, again, I doubt China would do anything against Iran. He's not going to go against BRICS, especially how we just saw how, for example, Putin reacted to India, right? India stopped buying Russian oil, started buying from the United States, and then they came back and said, please, can we buy oil from you? And they said, sure, but you're no longer getting a discount. You're going to pay actually $5 more now as a result of this. So I don't think Xi is going to go up against their compatriots in Iran or do anything that would oppose BRICS. I do not see that happening at all. In fact, I see them aiding and abetting them even more. We already know they're getting intelligence coming out from Russia and China that the Iranians are using. France has already said they're not going to send any type of navy to the region. Japan, South Korea said the exact same thing. And so did the UK. So who does Trump really have now? Are we going to send Israeli ships to the region? Are they going to send Israeli boots to the ground? And if not, why not? After all, this is their war. But look at this. It goes on to say in this article, he stated that even though Iran's military was 100% destroyed, all right, I guess, it was easy for Tehran to continue threatening ships with drones, mines, and short-range missiles. The United States has said that we will be bombing the hell out of Iran's shoreline to try to counter that. Again, I ask you the simple question. What is the purpose of sending these troops to the Karg Island? What benefit does it have for us? Why is the Israelis, why are they not sending ships to the region now to help aid and abet our allies through? And why are they not sending boots on the ground? Oh, it's probably because they're in Lebanon right now. Or they're in Gaza, right? Those wars that never stop. There's no ceasefires happening. You have 800 different Lebanese now that have been killed in these strikes. Over 800,000 now displaced. No one's talking about that, of course. But I digress. We are also hearing from Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi over the weekend. And he said very clearly that the strait will really stay closed at this point. That's what his words were. And he said it very succinctly. He said, listen, we're the ones that have been attacked, and this will end on our terms now. That's what he's been saying right now. Roughly 3,750 people have been killed across the region since the war began on February 28th, with the U.S. and Israeli bombs hitting inside Iran. And they're obviously very upset about this. We've also hit, like I said to you before, we hit that girls' school, killing at least 165 school-aged elementary school girls. Didn't have to happen. We double struck that building. creating an inferno, burning them up alive. And yet I have nowhere have we heard anything about any accountability, anyone being fired for this. I mean, folks, this is a war crime when you are actively targeting civilians. And of course, when you're ignoring the rules of engagement in a war. You know, it's one thing to be in a war and hit military sites and attack troops in the region. That's one thing, okay? It's another thing when you are actually killing civilians, especially young girls, by the way. So let's listen to the foreign minister right now. Again, he's speaking very clearly about this and about the reasons about what's taking place. Let's take a listen to clip one.
Well, as a matter of fact, the Strait of Hormuz is open. It is only closed to the tankers and ships belong to our enemies, to those who are attacking us and their allies. Others are free to pass. Of course, many of them prefer not because of their security concerns. This has nothing to do with us. And at the same time, there are many tankers and ships who are passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and I can say that the strait is not closed, but it is only closed to American, Israeli, ships and tankers, and not to others.
So there you go. He's defying what's going on here. He's saying to Trump, basically, we're not letting you through. We told you we're going to close this. It'll stay closed so long as this war goes on, as we see fit. Your allies will not get through the region. Now, they could have mines. I doubt they have mines because they have enough drones to actually hit this. And of course, if you look at the terrain of Iran's coastline that's right next to the strait, it's very mountainous. It's not even, right? It's not like sea level. Now, you can hide a lot of different missile launchers in that region, and you can hide people using drones. Yeah, we know the drones have been very effective. Absolutely, 100%. So again, folks, I tell you this for several reasons. One, this is not going to let up anytime soon. But two, we don't have an objective here. What is the objective? Because we're not going to get regime change out of this. And if there is no regime change as a result of this, why are we bombing the hell out of them? Why are we bombing 7,000 different sites? What use does that have when you don't take out the existing government? And of course, when the people are not rising up as you had expected. I vehemently disagree with Newt Gingrich's position that 85 million Iranians hate their government. I don't believe that number at all. Yes, of course, there are people inside Iran that do not like this government. I understand that. I know Iranians in the United States probably by and large do not like the existing government. But when you are, again, trying to have regime change, you have to control the ground too. You can't just blow up the ground. They'll simply just rebuild. That's all they'll do. And when you make a martyr out of the supreme leader now, you get a lot of people in defense of this government now, which we're seeing, again, more and more support for. And I tell you that because the Ayatollah, when he was still living, the previous Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, he called just a few weeks before this war took place. He called for a national rally day inside Iran. And he got 20 million Iranians in the streets of Tehran, a city of about 10 million, coming out in support of the government. That's what he got. 20 million people showed up for that. In a country of 93 million people. That's a significant chunk of the population that showed up one day for the Ayatollah, for the government. And now they're chanting his name in the street right now. So I don't think you get the Iranian people as a whole to back you. I don't think it's going to work. And I think we had a major misstep with this. I think we really should have listened to the Joint Chiefs of Staff here, the chairman on this, General Kane, who really said this is not a good idea. And Paul Craig Roberts says the exact same thing. He should have taken the advice of the Joint Chiefs, not listening to just Netanyahu's orders, or advice, if you will. Whatever way you want to look at it. So now we're in another Middle Eastern war. And of course, Netanyahu now complains to Trump that Israel has a severe shortage of interceptor missiles. Well, no kidding. No kidding. This war was not thought out well. We were unprepared for it. And now, of course, what does Israel do now? Did they resort to their nuclear weapons program? God, I hope not. Don't forget they do have that Samson option as well, just to keep things on the up and up here. They could resort to that. I hope they would never resort to that. That would be just devastating, obviously, to the entire region. But we really don't have many out. Where's the way out for this? How do we say, listen, we're done? Is it time that President Trump just comes out and says, listen, we're done? You know, he can read out all the stats he wants. 7,000 targets hit, military obliterated. They're calling me and asking for a ceasefire. Just end it. Just end it. And then, of course, behind the scenes, you try to pick up whatever pieces you can. But it's going to be on Iran's terms. And I told you this before. I think Iran is going to say, listen, we want a mutual security cooperation treaty with you right now. We want the end of these sanctions on us. You're crippling our economy, just like you cripple Cuba's, for example. We want your bases out of the region. We're going to implore our neighbors now to stop working with you. And we want to govern as we're going to govern. That's the way this is going to be. That's the way this is going to work. I really see our position in the Middle East as a result of this dying out. I don't see it improving at all. And by the way, I have to ask, do you think these Gulf Arab states, by the way, are going to want us in the region? When there will be devastation should this war continue on for much longer. When you have people running out of food, when you have people running out of drinking water, when you have the economies crumbling and crashing because their number one export is no longer viable to them. Their refineries are no longer operable. I mean, this is the reality of the situation. And we have to thank Netanyahu. We thank President Trump for this. This is the reason why we're in this mess. Not because Iran has nuclear weapons. Not because they chant death to America. Because we decided to go in there and start bombing them. We thought this was an opportune moment. And it turned out to be an opportune blunder as a result of it. Again, I call it as I see it. That's the way I see this right now. I don't think we're getting in a stronger position. I think we're getting thinned out, if you will. We're wasting a lot of our military munitions on this conflict, this war. And we're not going to achieve the results that we want because they are not going to bow down to this. Should have stuck with the negotiations, President Trump. You should have stuck with that instead of listening to Netanyahu and not, of course, factions of your government right now. Yeah, I see this article in Breitbart. It says, Australia and Japan have rejected a call by President Donald Trump for warships to be sent to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Why would they? Why would they risk their ships now? Have them sunk to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. It's just not going to be a thing. We're not going to see that result. I think a lot of people are going to bow out. I think this is going to affect our relationship with a lot of our allies as well moving forward, unfortunately. Let's continue talking about the economy just a little bit more, and then we'll get into some more news topics for today. This is the Washington Times says, gas prices will now stay high for a few more weeks, but will drop after war, is what President Trump's Energy Secretary Chris Wright has said. Yeah. This is the same guy that put out a tweet a couple weeks ago. This is all starting up, well, a couple weeks ago. I think it was early last week. And then again, we saw the markets react in kind. And then, of course, the numbers shot right back up. We see Brent crude today over $100 again. But what most people don't know is that a lot of people he knows made a whole lot of money off the betting of this on the poly market, by the way. It's amazing. These people get away with this nonsense. And we're seeing the same rhetoric coming out about this. It's a short-term disruption to the flow of energy. We kept hearing this all over the media, too. There's a nice collage out there, too. A short-term gain for a long-term, whatever the hell the phrase was. They kept saying it's a short-term disruption for a long-term gain, I think is what the phrase was. And it was repeated by politicians, the news media, the talking heads, and what have you. Oh, a short-term disruption. Really? Interesting. How long is this short-term disruption going to go for? Because Americans are feeling it right now. But look at what he says here. Americans will feel it for a few more weeks. So you get to pay almost double the price for gas now just for a few more weeks, is what Chris Wright told MS Nobody Cares Meet the Press. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. But at the end, we will have removed the greatest risk to global energy supplies, whatever the hell that means. will go to a world more abundant in energy, more affordable in energy, and less risky for American soldiers and commerce in the Middle East. What is he talking about here? We're not defeating Iran. It's not going to happen. In fact, you're making it more of a foe as a result of this. And I'm sick of hearing about we've been at war with them for 47 years. Really? We have? Now, maybe we have been at war with them. When was the last time Iran attacked us? Does anyone remember? Oh, yeah, they never did. Can anyone remember the last time an American citizen was killed by an Iranian? Yeah, the answer to that is never as well. Now, I can point to several examples where the opposite is true, where we've actually killed Iranian citizens. Again, look at the girls' school. Look at the women's volleyball team of 20, I believe, that we, again, hit in one of these attacks and killed every single one of them. We could also look to the Iranian war. How many of their troops were killed because we backed Saddam Hussein in the 1980s under Reagan? Yeah, folks, who's giving them chemical weapons too, by the way? The Iraqis, to use on the Iranians. People don't forget these things. So when we say, oh, they're shouting death to America, well, they're referring to the government, number one. That's just something to be aware of. Again, I'm not excusing the language. Don't think I am. I don't think I'm on Iran's side in any of this, by the way. But if we're talking about a serious war and a reason to go to war, there is no serious reason to go to this war. That's my point with all this. And instead of using diplomacy, we decided to use war, and it's not working for us. And now we're seeing gas prices beginning to spike. Now, Americans have been feeling this pain at the pump because the Strait of Hormuz, the world's largest critical oil checkpoint, remains largely closed to shipping to the United States. Now, according to the AAA Auto Club, the regular gasoline now has jumped to an average of $3.69 per gallon for unleaded, up from $2.92 per gallon a month ago. Wonderful. How do you like that, folks? Does that make America great again? I don't think so. Now, asked if he's confident, referring back to Chris Wright, that gas prices will dip below $3 a gallon this summer, Mr. Wright said, there's a very good chance that'll be through. Well, now, wait a minute. I thought he said we're going to have a world where we're more abundant in energy and, of course, affordability in energy. Well, should that be a definite yes? Oh, but he goes on to say now, here's the truth of the matter. There's no guarantee in war. The time frame's still not largely entirely clear, but I think there's a good amount of chance of a goal of the administration, and that's very possible. Yeah, he has no idea. He has no idea what's going to happen. But I can tell you, 100% indefinitely here, anytime you choke out 20% of a global supply chain, you're going to see the prices all around the world respond to this. That's why Brent crude went up to, I think it was $119 recently. And I believe today, I can check on CNBC right now, but that's why you're seeing Brent crude starting to skyrocket. It's starting to go up. Now we're seeing some fluctuation in that from time and time again, but largely it's staying upwards. That's what's taking place right now. Yeah, right now Brent crude is $101.88 per barrel right now. WTI crude, $95.28. Remember, folks, the last month it was $68 a barrel for Brent crude. I think it was $62 for WTI crude, if I'm not mistaken. That's a significant jump in pricing per barrel. That's why you're feeling it at the pumps right now. Again, despite the market going up and down, because you're getting the words of, oh, look, we bombed this. Oh, it's almost over. Just a little bit longer. But once people actually see that supply chain just wiped out, the markets have no choice but to respond to that. That's just the way economics works. It's supply and demand, folks. Economics 101. Yep, Chris Wright made a whole lot of money on this. This is, Americans are feeling this. Americans are not happy about this. Here it is. The short-term pain for long-term gain. There we go. It's quite extraordinary. Yeah, you probably heard that over the last couple of days. The short-term pain. Yep, you're going to have a lot of short-term pain, folks. A lot of it. Not just in the energy, too, by the way. You're going to start feeling it across the board because that's the way these things work. We're also seeing food prices right now affected by this. Why? Because it costs more to ship the food to the markets. That's the way things work. It costs them more, your costs go up. It's basic economics. And what are you going to do as a result of that? 60% of American families live paycheck to paycheck. That means every single month, they're relying on that paycheck to make ends meet. When you start raising the price of something, a commodity like oil, for example, and instead of paying $2.90, you're paying $3.70, excuse me. That's a big dip into your wallet, more than most people would understand, especially if you have to travel for work. So we've got to understand that when those prices of oil go up, everything else responds to that. We saw it under Biden, by the way. Once those oil prices started skyrocketing, $4, $5, $6. I couldn't even believe it for a while. But everything else responded and acclimated to that. And that's going to be the same thing that happens as a result of this very, very soon. So you can expect that to take place. One more thing I want to go over before we stop talking about what's taking place in the foreign world today, before we get into our domestic problems here in the United States. PJ Media has an article out. It says China now floods the skies near Taiwan and raises a dangerous question. Oh, yeah. So while we're all choked up in the Middle East right now, we're focused on that. What's happening to our ally Taiwan? Well, the Defense Ministry reported a major surge of Chinese military aircrafts operating near the island over the weekend. And we had radar operators now tracking dozens of aircrafts moving through the surrounding airspace in a pattern that drew immediate attention across the region. So in other words, they're running drills again around the island. Now, the activity marked one of the largest recent waves of Chinese air operations around Taiwan in recent history. Now, Taiwan didn't report any of these Chinese military planes that went beyond the median line and entered the zone for a week from February 27th to March 5th. After two were detected on March 6th, the next 4 days had none. Now, such flights had resumed in small numbers between Wednesday and Friday. So what they're saying to you folks is that they're possibly surveillance aircrafts, they're support planes that are flying very close to the island. They're running drills right now. Why are they running drills? Because they might see this as a very good moment for them to act and strike. One can only know. It says here that the aircraft operated in areas near Taiwan's air defense identification zones, which Taiwan closely monitors with radar and interceptor aircrafts. Taiwan's military scrambled its fighters and activated missile systems while tracking the formations, and it is treating the flights as another set of serious pressure from Beijing. Absolutely. Again, this is what they're doing right now. Xi has increased the pressure, the military pressure on Taiwan for really the past 10 years right now. And as they highlighting the Chinese aircrafts and the naval vessels now appearing around the island more frequently than it did in the past 10 years. Why is that? Because, folks, it's a beta test. That's what it comes down to. Can we fly over your island? Can we fly over your military bases? Can we collect reconnaissance or surveillance? Can we take pictures? What can we do? How much can we get away with? That's what they're looking at right now. Remember, folks, this is a tiny island next to a massive country of 1.4 billion people. Now, I got to be honest with you, though. I am a little bit surprised about this because if you look at the government of Taiwan right now, a lot of them are really looking to integrate back into China. Most of you probably don't know that. I talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show. Most of the people in the government already want to annex back into China. This is what they want. Now, whether or not that is voted out and happens, I can't tell you. But you're seeing a lot of sentiments inside the Taiwan government that really want to annex themselves and reconnect back into China as it once was. That's the truth of the matter. Now, whether or not that happens, whether or not that vote occurs, I don't know. But I can't imagine a lot of people in the Taiwanese government being upset about China actually, taking over the island. I just don't see it that way. And I don't think they would have to use a lot of force to do so, to be honest with you. So yeah, you see a lot of these military planners. They're often running these types of drills in areas close to Taiwan because the region sits near one of the most strategic sea lanes and the air corridors in the region. Now, it could be just that. It could be to put Taiwan on notice. But when you see these things happening much, much more closely, Taipei has to ask themselves, Are we next on this list? Is what's taking place in the Middle East going to allow China to just come sweep in and take this island? Of course, that can only be answered in time, but it does give some discretion as to what China is focusing on and what they're thinking about. Yep. That's what's taking place right now. And again, did we even give Taiwan the arms that they bought from us? I don't even think we did that. I think they bought $19 billion worth of missiles from us, and I don't think we even delivered on that. So, wonderful. I mean, I know, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin would love this, but I don't think it's taking place right now, unfortunately. So, only time will tell, folks, what's taking place with Taiwan, and if China would decide to make a movement in the region at a time like this. And with the United States military stretched as thin as it is right now, when we have all of our resources reverting out of several of these locations, like especially the Marines coming from the Far East into the Persian Gulf soon, China sees this and goes, okay, now's the perfect time to see what we can get away with. Now is our time to go for it. Now is our time to make this happen. And we know China wants this. They're very much open about what they want. And another one of our allies is left out in the cold. That's the way it is to me. That's the way I see things. All right, folks, let's move on. Let's talk about what's taking place with the SAVE Act, which, again, is going to be voted on tomorrow, I do believe. And this is in the Hill. It says President Trump's allies are now planning to take over the Senate floor this week in a bid to pass the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Save America Act, setting up a major test for the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who is under pressure from President Trump and, of course, the MAGA base, as he ought be, to extend the debate over voting and its reform for a long time, if possible. Here's the thing I want to say about this before we move on. First of all, this is a good bill. We should have safeguards in our elections. For those of you that have been listening to my show, I've been very stalwart on this. We need to have this. And when you see voter fraud, like as it takes place in several of these elections, I'm looking at things, for example, when I was in California, I'm watching the election results, and of course you can figure out Kamala Harris won in 2024, 8:01 p.m., 0 precincts reporting. Adam Schiff, the winner, indefinitely. He's already been called by either the news media or I don't know who in the California government just calls these races. I don't know. But they know at 8:01 with 0 precincts have been reported that 2 of the people they want in have won. Yet it takes weeks, 4 weeks, a month later for you to figure out who your congressman is in some of these cases. That doesn't make any sense, folks. It doesn't make any sense at all. You see your candidate, oh yeah, he's winning. You forget about it the next day, and then, of course, weeks later you find out, oh, the Democrats squeaked by with 500 votes. It's just very interesting that we have these electronic voting machines in various states. We have no voter ID laws. You don't have to show an ID to vote in several states. Certainly no photo ID. And yet, somehow, we seem to think that these are fine. This is okay. You can sign up on the election day to vote. You can ballot harvest. You can give your ballot to someone, and everyone thinks everything's fine. And by the way, since 2020, now you can mail ballots out, which just causes the whole scene to just, hey, you're going to throw your ballot away? Just give it to me. Oh, yeah. They shove them through. And, of course, nobody can say a thing about it. And by the way, you can't ever track your votes either. That's another big problem. So I want this to happen. I'm sure you all want this to happen as well. Thune doesn't have the votes right now. I don't think so. I think he'll still put it forward. But when you have, in a recent poll, 71% in a Harvard-Harris poll that just came out, of about 2,000 registered voters in support of the SAVE Act, that is a lot of people. We've had estimates up to 83% of Americans want this. Democrats, Republicans, independents alike. So if he's not going to use the talking filibuster, fine. But we have to get this on the floor. We have to see how these Democrats are going to vote. And any rhino Republicans, they would say, we don't want this. Why would you not want safeguards in place for this? Why would you not want someone to prove they are a U.S. citizen when they vote? Show an ID so they can prove they are the person voting in this election. It doesn't make any sense. But here was Thune yesterday on the Senate floor. Take a listen to what he had to say.
At the core of the Save America Act is the requirement that individuals provide proof of citizenship to register to vote and then show an ID when they go to the polls. In other words, it would require Americans to demonstrate that they're eligible to vote and that they are who they say they are when they go to do so. Not to keep using the word common sense, but it's pretty common sense, right? We require photo ID for a whole lot of things in this country for obvious reasons. Getting on a plane, show your official government-issued photo ID. Go to the doctor, same thing. Provide your government-issued photo ID plus your insurance card. Get hired for a new job. Provide your government-issued photo ID when you start. Mr. President, public libraries ask for a photo ID. In New York City, you have to provide some type of photo ID to get a library card.
So you have to get a driver's license, a valid form of identification, for just about any other thing as an adult in this country. To get a library card, you got to have a photo ID, but not to vote in our federal elections. Now, Senator Mike Lee, who's a leading proponent of this bill and sponsor of it, says that Trump wants to see Republicans go all out and is envisioning an epic floor fight. Well, that would probably be the case, I would have to imagine. But let's see how this works. Let's put it to a vote. Let's see who comes out and says, no, I'm not going to do this. And let's have them defend themselves. That would at least get the conversation going. That would at least get people talking about this. Your congressman or woman, your senator, refuses to secure your God-given right to have a free and fair election. I think we should go further than this, to be honest with you. I say we need to get rid of all of the electronic voting machines. Anything that can be plugged to the internet has to go. Everyone is given a paper ballot. You go into your booth, you fill it out, you submit it, you get a carbon copy of that. You know that you are voter 100 in your precinct. All the results have to be published online, of course, with anonymity, of course. They don't say exactly who you are, but you know who you are. You know you are voter 100. So you go online and say, oh yeah, look, yep, I voted for all these things. Perfect. No discretion. So I'll keep my ballot, though, just in case anything happens for my precinct. And that way you know your vote counts. You see how your vote tallies into the other 99 people that just voted. Maybe you're the 50th person that voted for President Trump. You say, okay, this makes sense now. That's the way these things work. There's got to be a safeguard to ensure that people are voting and they are who they say they are. And they're eligible to vote. But this whole idea of we're going to just ballot harvest, we're going to just hand out mail-in ballots to people all over the country. You have all these ballots going on, then people go into, obviously, they go in to vote at the precinct, so they don't need the ballot, so they hand the ballot over. How do I know they're not using that ballot? And of course, all you get back from them, as is in California, yep, your vote was tallied. What does that mean? I want to see how my vote tallies in. I want to see how I voted. I want to see that my vote for my candidate, my judge, the proposition, everything is accounted for that I voted for. And I think President Trump, really what he should do, he really wants to push this. If they put this to a floor vote this week and you don't get the votes, fine, whatever. But what I think he needs to do, he needs to forensic audit one of these states that has a lot of voter irregularities. We'll just say that. And what better state than California or New York or Chicago? Any of these other states that have no photo ID or simply you can't even show an ID to vote, like what Gavin Newsom did inside California. And you got to ask yourself, why would somebody want to do that? Why would somebody want to have the opportunity to create fraudulent voting? Well, I think we all know why. Because they benefit from it. The Democrats would benefit. That's the only reason why that would happen. That's why Democrats love open borders. When you know that 3 out of 4 people that come in this country illegally are going to vote Democrat, that looks pretty good for you. Of course, you make up sanctuary city rules, so you don't cooperate with the federal government, which again is a breach of your oath of office. You keep these voters and you stay in power indefinitely. That's how Democrats learn how to win. That's how they flip California from red to blue. And they're doing it for many other states and many other cities as well. That's the point of all this. So again, I'm not expecting this to go very far this week. It's probably not going to happen. But Trump, if he forensic audits one of these states, goes through and says, look at all this voter fraud that we figured out. We took the source codes of all these voting machines. We tracked it. We figured out X, Y, and Z. Boom. Fraud. Or, hey, this candidate actually won. That would be a whole, tip over the house of cards. Be probably upset a lot of people, but maybe this is the step you have to go through. Maybe this is what Trump needs to do. And I don't know why he hasn't done this already, to be honest with you. Go to the last election, take a state that doesn't have any type of voter ID laws or make you show an ID, and forensic audit it. Yeah, that's the only way you can do that to figure out if there's actual cheating. Figure that out. He's the president. He could do this. And make a case for it. Listen, this is why we're making this bill. Because there's rampant fraud in this state. And here's the proof of it. That's the way you got to go about doing this. That's the way I think about it. Chuck Schumer can say whatever he wants. I don't think, again, he provides any type of meaningful evidence that this is a egregious bill. One of the worst pieces of legislature that he's ever seen, which he just came out recently and said, unfortunately. All right, folks, let's go over one more article before we end today's broadcast. Let's talk about Brendan Carr of the FCC. On Saturday, he renewed his criticism now and threats against broadcasters over their content. Now, this is interesting to me. This time with President Trump's criticism of Iran. And, of course, the war, and, of course, reporting it as the backdrop. So, in other words, if you're someone like me who's a free thinker, although I am a conservative and I'm a registered Republican, and I speak out against something that the administration really likes, like the Iran war. They want support for this war. Well, if I speak out against that, if I give you facts that I've accumulated, I shouldn't tell you these facts. I should just go with the flow. I should go with the whatever Fox News tells me to say. Just parrot that back to you. Don't talk about the reality of war. Don't talk about the reality of just sending 2,500 Marines to Kark Island and the ramifications of all that. Don't talk about the ramifications of the economy or the consequences that can result here in the United States. I shouldn't talk about any of this. According to them, I should say everything's great. We're winning 7,000 targets. The Iranians are begging us for a deal, even though that was never purported from anybody ever. I mean, it just goes to show you. This is the ridiculousness of this. Right? For example, I could tell you, and I know this unequivocally, Trump said, or Witkoff, I believe, said this to Trump, that during the negotiations, it was Arachi that came out and said, hey, we could build 11 nuclear bombs. They were essentially threatening the United States with that. But you have to understand, there was also a moderator there. It was the foreign minister of Oman, who was sitting in these negotiations as the moderator. He never reported hearing that. So again, Witkoff could say whatever he wants. He could say to Trump, then Trump could say, hey, look, they said they're going to build 10 bombs. Geez, that's threatening us. To which I say, okay, let's say that did happen. Let's say he did threaten the United States, says, we could build 10 bombs right now. Why would you schedule another meeting for the following Monday then? That doesn't make any sense. Why would the foreign minister of Oman come out and say, hey, the talks are working well? Why would the Iranians say that? So you have to look at all the facts, folks. That's what I'm telling you. Again, I don't tell you these things so I can hear myself talk. I tell you these things because I want you to know and put things into perspective about what's happening right now. But now we've got this threat now coming out of the Federal Communications Commission. So now broadcasters who air quote-unquote fake news must correct course before their license renewals come up, is what Carr posted on X. So here's another problem. Who decides what's fake news, what's true, what's false? Because you disagree with something I say, it's false now? This is the problem with a lot of what's going on here. You don't have a monopoly on all the facts, apparently. I should be able to communicate with my audience with information I find that I believe is relevant, that I can substantiate. I listen to many different people speak. I read different articles. I go through these things. I listen to experts in the fields. And I come to my own conclusions, and I share that information with you. Things that can be definitively discussed and talked about. But they're coming out now and saying, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, other low-life papers, that's how they're claiming they're categorizing them, and media of terrible reporting on the United States and Israel's war with Iran. So in other words, you can't be against the war. You have to be for the war. Otherwise, you're going to lose your license. We will shut you down. And just like Abraham Lincoln did when he shut down over 300 newspapers during the Civil War that opposed, obviously, his war on the mortal tariff, which most people don't know about. So again, if you speak out against the government, now you get shut down? Have you ever heard of anything so anti-American as that? Either do what we say, talk about what we want to talk about, or we'll shut you down. That's what Brendan Carr is really telling us in this article here. Yep. It says broadcasters must operate in the public interest and they will lose their license if they do not. Well, the public interest is the truth. Facts of the matter. Not telling you feel-good information so you get ratings boosts. I don't think that works at all. Or carrying the party line. We have to be free thinkers when we're discussing these things, folks. I think you all would agree with me on that. I mean, it's easy for anyone to simply just go and read the old mantra, isn't it? Folks, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you so much. Hope you learned something from today's show. Make sure you keep your minds and bodies strong. Have a great rest of the day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy. God bless.